Hey everyone, welcome in. You know, Today we're diving into something, well, I know a lot of you are grappling with that feeling after you've had a sort of awakening, right? And you're craving some sort of spiritual community, but then at the same time you're wondering like, how do I really grow authentically, you know? How do I make sure I don't get like caught up in all the noise?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a real balance, isn't it? Finding that balance.
It really is. And I think that's exactly why we're unpacking these reflections from group to group context. Did you catch that title?
Yeah,
By Pedro Elias.
I did. Yeah.
And he does not mince words
No, he doesn't.
about the difference between a traditional spiritual group, right,
Right.
versus what he calls a group context.
Yeah. No, he offers some uh, really powerful, I think, food for thought in this, especially
Yeah.
for those who are, maybe earlier on in their journey. And
It's so true. Okay, so picture this, right? You've had that initial spark of like spiritual awakening.
Mm,
The world's kind of shifted a bit, right?
right.
And you're naturally drawn to others who kind of get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're seeking guidance, belonging, that sense of like we're all in this together. And I think Elias really captures that early stage so well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
No, it's that deeply human yearning for connection. It's like we're wired for it,
Yeah.
right? But and I think this is where his insights are so valuable. That very same wiring can also make us really vulnerable
Oh, absolutely.
if we're not careful.
Yeah, it's like we're trading one hunger for another.
Right.
We go from like seeking the spiritual truth to needing that confirmation from a group, a leader.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I think this idea of the spiritual ecosystem, as he calls it, becomes so crucial to examine. He he compares it to, and this might sound a little strange at first, but he compares it to a farmer and chickens.
Okay.
And before you think, wait, what? Let me explain.
Yeah.
So the leader's at the center, right? They're radiating energy, and the members sort of circle around, drawing from that source. Does that sound familiar at all?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. And yeah, I mean, initially, sure, maybe it feels nurturing, right? But what Elias is suggesting is it can become a little bit like, well, those chickens reliant on the farmer for.
They're very sustenance. They're very sustenance.
Yeah.
Dependence rather than empowerment.
Yes.
And this feeds into a concept that he brings up that might be a little new for some people. Egregores.
I have to admit, when I first read that word, I was picturing some kind of mythical beast. I don't know why.
Chuckles. It can sound a little esoteric.
It does.
But think of an egregore as sort of the energy field that a group creates,
Okay.
right? All the thoughts, the emotions, the beliefs kind of swirling together. And it's not inherently good or bad, but if the group's foundation is, say, blind faith in a leader, unquestioning acceptance of dogma, that's going to feed a very specific type of egregore.
Right, right. And then that egregore reinforces those same patterns.
Exactly. It creates that closed loop.
And it can really stifle critical thinking, genuine questioning. The very things that I think a lot of us associate with real spiritual growth.
Right. So not exactly that fertile ground for the kind of personal exploration I think a lot of us are seeking.
Exactly. And Elias, he highlights this through what he calls the red flags
Okay.
of a group that's kind of stuck in this pattern, right?
Mm.
And he talks about things like stagnation, inertia, almost a suffocating attachment. And he's really urging us to ask ourselves, have I encountered these dynamics? Does this feel truly expansive, or am I kind of shrinking myself to fit in? These are big questions, and I think ones that a lot of people listening right now might be like resonating with. But before we dive into the alternative that he presents, this group context, can we unpack those red flags a bit more? Like what might that actually look like for someone on the ground, so to speak?
Well, I think it can be really subtle, especially at
That's
first.
right.
Maybe there's this pressure to agree with the leader. You know, every word they say, like questioning, is kind of frowned upon.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you notice that your own personal growth, it feels less like you're expanding outwards and more like you're conforming inwards, kind of to the group's mold.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Thanks,
Like
Alex.
like your own unique shape is being like smoothed out to fit some kind of predetermined container.
Exactly. Yeah, and that brings us to, I think, what Elias is getting at with these group context distinctions, right?
Right.
Because it's not to say that all groups are inherently bad,
Yeah.
right? It's more about, I guess, what kind of soil are they offering for your own individual growth?
Right. He's not anti-group. He's just like anti-stagnation, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what does that look like in action then? This group context, how is that different from that chicken and farmer dynamic we were just talking about?
Yeah, well, imagine like a project team. You know,
Right.
everyone kind of comes with their own unique skills. They're coming together for a shared purpose, right? But but no one person is dictating every single move. There's
Right.
fluidity, there's mutual respect,
Mm.
and Elias suggests that what binds this kind of group together, this group context, isn't necessarily a leader's energy. It's more like a connection to something bigger than themselves.
So less about seeking that validation from a figurehead and more about, I don't know, like each person already has that kind of inner compass, and it's more about the shared direction that kind of draws them together.
That's it. And you hit on something really crucial there, which is that Elias is very adamant that inner work comes before engaging in a group context at all.
Okay.
Right. It's not about like joining a group to find yourself.
Right.
You're bringing your somewhat whole self to the table.
It's like you wouldn't join a band if you didn't know how to play an instrument,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You'd just be.
You'd be lost in the music, not contributing to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. That self-sufficiency is so key because it allows you to navigate, the group's dynamics, the inevitable disagreements, even without kind of falling into that dependence.
Right.
And that can be really tempting, especially I think early on, you're excited, maybe the leader's charismatic.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to mistake that initial like click of belonging
Yeah.
for, I don't know, like evidence that you finally found the answer.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah, yeah, been there.
Been there.
Which is why I love how he emphasizes, discernment, questioning. But how do we actually do that?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
how do you tell if you're truly like resonating with a group or just kind of getting swept up in the energy of it all?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And you know what I appreciate about Elias? He doesn't try to give these like easy answers.
Yeah, yeah.
He's more about kind of equipping us
Hmm.
with the questions to ask.
Which, let's be honest, sometimes that's much more valuable than a straight up answer.
Absolutely. Keeps us engaged.
Right. Keeps us thinking for ourselves. Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But he does offer clues along the way.
Okay.
And one that I think he keeps coming back to is that feeling of expansion, right? And not just intellectually like, oh, I'm learning new things, but does this group, does this context really help you grow into more of yourself?
Hmm.
Or do you feel like some part of you kind of has to stay hidden in order to really belong?
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't, like, belonging shouldn't come at the cost of our own authenticity.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this actually connects to another point that Elias makes that I found really fascinating, which is that he suggests that even these healthier group contexts,
Oh.
as beneficial as they can be, you know, they're ultimately not temporary.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not about finding that, like, one perfect group and just, like, latching on and never letting go.
That seems to be his point, which I'll admit that made me pause a little bit when I first read that
Yeah.
because it suggests a certain like transience even to the seeking itself.
Right.
Right? Like groups kind of form, they serve a purpose, and then they maybe naturally like dissolve.
Okay, so if that's true, right, for both kind of the more, I guess, traditional group structure and then also these like more fluid contexts, like, whoa, what are we left with? What's the takeaway for someone who's, really on this path?
Well, I think it brings us back to that initial question you asked, right? The
Yeah.
one that seems like Elias is really trying to nudge us towards, which is what is it that we're really seeking within these collective spaces?
Hmm.
If the containers themselves are temporary,
Right.
then what is that through line? You know?
It's so easy to get caught up in the group itself, right? Like the teachings or the social aspect of it.
Slowly.
Are we ultimately like, are we seeking belonging? Are we seeking meaning? Are we seeking connection to something big? Like, what is it?
And if so, can those things really be found exclusively within a group structure? Or is the group, maybe just one tool among many on a much larger journey of self-discovery?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot.
Elias has definitely given us a lot to ponder, and all of you listening, I'm sure as well.
He has.
And I think for me, the biggest takeaway from all of this is that that shift in perspective that it encourages, right? It's not about clinging to any one group or anyone teaching even, but it's really about cultivating that inner compass, that self-reliance so that we can navigate any context that we find ourselves in with wisdom, with authenticity,
Beautifully said.
and with that with that sense of discernment, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's about trusting ourselves as the compass,
Yeah.
not just the map.
There you go. Yes, exactly. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
I think so too.
If Elias is right and these groups really are temporary, what does that say about the very nature of spiritual seeking itself, right? What are we truly after? So keep that question alive as you continue your own exploration. And thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been such a pleasure having you.
Likewise.
And to everyone listening, until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper into the mysteries of self and spirit